This week, we'll be going up to the bad north, trying to scrounge up some spare change, and trying to figure out what a Deltarune is, on episode 163 of Indie Game Riot. Indie Game Riot!
Hey everybody, I am Josh, joined once again by Mr. Ian McCammon.
Howdy.
That just sent shivers up your spine. I know. It was like
really
the movie
does.
Rudy in real life.
Oh. Yes, Rudy indeed. Rudy indeed. I would have gone for Bull Durham, but you really cut to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. So yeah, we're here. We missed last week, but Ian is currently going through finals for his classes. So you know that is one to happen because unless Ian wants to fail miserably at life, which I don't think he does.
So I've been doing it so far. I'm looking for a change of pace.
It wasn't quite working out. You would think eventually I'd be like, hey man, life is working out so well by failing, and it just didn't go that direction. So trying a different pace. I get it. Take a drink of this quote tea. I don't know. Twitch rules change constantly. I don't.
Iced tea.
Because here's the thing. I mentioned this before the stream that this is tea with the air quotes for those of you who can't see the screen. That I'm drinking, and yet I feel like they're selective in some of the rules because Jingle Jam is going on over on the Yogscast channel. Yogscast, right?
No.
Jesus Christ, man. Yeah, they're like a
I
Let's
only
Play.
know one podcast.
Well, they're not a podcast. They're a Let's Play channel just called the Yogscast.
Shows what I know.
But they've been around for years, and they're like they've literally raised since the first of this month. They're probably around like 2.5 million now. And they stream all the way through Christmas. And for charity, and they go through the Humble Bundle. You can go to Humble Bundle right now. By the way, donate to charity if you want through them and get games. But this is not me like advertising them. I just information. But throughout their stream, they're like notorious for drinking gin all the time. Gin and tonics or just gin straight up. So why do they get to do that? They're drinking constantly on stream throughout this whole thing, by the way. And yet, I've heard that other people can get flagged for it. And I understand they're big streamers, but hypocrisy, Twitch, hypocrisy. Just saying. I personally don't care if anyone drinks. That's all I'm putting out there. That is neither here nor there. That was very loud. Jeez, hold on. Let me turn myself down just a bit. Blasting my own eardrums out in the monitor. That is neither here nor there. But, as I was saying, sorry about missing last week, but, good reasons for Ian. He did join us for Indie Fireside if you missed that, so that, did I put out that episode? I'm so lost. I did.
That's right there. I can see it.
Okay. So that is available for viewing. If you missed that, it was a good episode. Ian brought up some good conversation points about the Void. Was what it was, which I didn't realize until like close to the day that you were supposed to stream that the Void was made by the same people that made Knock Knock and the new what is the game?
Pathologic.
Yeah, Pathologic. I was like, oh shit.
I played Knock Knock actually a little bit after that.
That's a weird game.
It is.
I don't fully understand it.
I understand very little of it, although I have started piecing together more and more. They honestly, Ice Pick Lodge, they might be the most interesting indie studio I've ever encountered.
The one topic that you guys talked about was about how they alienate people, and somehow it makes them successful by alienating so many of the gamers. And it's very, very true, like that statement. It's like their games are like, you know how hipsters alienate the people? It's kind of like that. They're like the hipsters of like darkness in games, like dark games.
It is. I mean, they really
I'm
are.
hesitant to call it horror, but
yeah, but it's definitely influenced by horror. Has a sort of horror philosophy, and I guess Knock Knock is sort of more explicitly, a horror.
Yeah,
like
I think Knock Knock is probably as close as I got.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. The only thing I can attribute their commercial success to is that the Eastern European market has a different set of values in games than we do, which makes sense with games like Stalker that are like so incredibly punishing. Stalker found like a cult following here, but it's like a huge deal in Eastern Europe.
The punishing. I think Vance was saying that it's like an everyday life in Russia, just punishing, because everything's hard mode.
Right, of course.
All the Russian listeners, like, I resent that. I can't do Russian accent. I got to work on that dialect. Anyway,
I don't know. I have one of my classmates, Pavlo Popov, is Ukrainian.
Hold up. What's his name?
Pavlo Popov.
Are you serious?
I am dead serious.
That is his real name.
He is super Ukrainian. He has a thick Ukrainian accent, and he likes hard games.
My name is Pavlo Popov.
Yeah, it's intense.
It sounds like you're saying pop off too, like he just pops off at the slightest like inclination.
He kind of does too. Sometimes I I have a like really bad habit of making I guess like offhand homoerotic jokes in certain contexts, and whenever I do, Pablo's always like, "My God, Ian, my God."
In Mother Russia, in Mother Russia, you get poisoned by Putin himself for making.
I will say though, first of all he's a nice guy, despite his incredibly intimidating, and he's also absolutely stunningly fantastic artist who works on Paw Patrol as an animator. So
tell him to get. I will voice Paw Patrol. Tell him to get me in there, man.
I'll let him know.
You know how ecstatic my kids would be.
I think he's a low man on the totem pole, but I'll see what I can do.
Hey man,
so
I'm just saying I can't be choosy.
I'll float your name.
So other than finals, what have you been going on? What's been going on?
I mean, that's really been it. It's been pretty wall to wall.
How's your lady? Like in Canada so far up there. I know
she's doing well. She's from here originally, so it's very much a homecoming for her. She's digging it to a certain extent. I think she wants to. So she still has her American job because she works remotely, but she's getting fed up with it. So I think she's probably going to look for something else soon. But it's hard, obviously. So. But yeah, overall, she's digging it. I think she's happy to be here.
Cool. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad things are working out despite the stress. Well, you know what else is about to work out?
Would that be an indie news injection of like steroids? Is that what you're going for here?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
You know what you use to work out? An injection. Specifically in
I get where you're going. I get where you're going. I
was trying to help you out.
I didn't take it that far because I was like, I just didn't put the effort in.
I know. I was trying to fill the gaps there, but I think that this has been a 100% successful segue.
Yep. Segue.
Are you bored with the same old games?
Yeah.
Why, then give yourself an indie news injection.
Thanks, Indie Games.
This week on Indie News Injection, the very first thing we're going to be talking about is... Hold on a second. There we go. Concerned Ape. That's right. The developer of Stardew Valley is actually going to be self-publishing from now on. And that includes Stardew Valley, except for on the Switch. So for those of you who don't know, he was published since Stardew Valley is really... the beginning of its success, I should say, through until recently, by Chucklefish of many games fame and infamy in some cases, I guess, because I think they had Tech when he was doing the show. He had an issue with Chucklefish, but yeah, whatever. But anyway, he is now self-publishing Stardew Valley and anything else that he's working on because he feels like he can from this point. It's like that point in his career where he wants to. Why is it? Hold on a sec. There we go. It's actually going to be starting on the 14th of this month. You just feel like it's that point in his career that he wants to take things on his own. The only thing, like I said, the Chucklefish will still be publishing on the Switch because I guess they have the means and the resources to kind of help with that, since it's such a drastic change from PC and the other consoles, and it's a fairly recent thing that came to the Switch, I believe. So it's just they're kind of like staying on for that to help with the smooth transition over to the Switch, but everything else he's doing it on its own. What do you think of that?
I think it's not surprising. I mean, the guy's at this point probably got so much infrastructure, by which I mean fucking money, that he can probably do basically whatever he wants. The one thing that is weird to me, though, is that, so what is the deal with the connection between Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon? Because they are almost identical in so many ways. They're not 100% of the ways, but in so many ways that you'd almost think... See, I thought that Nintendo owned the Harvest Moon license. And Nintendo is so lawyer happy that it amazes me that the guy who made Stardew Valley has been able to avoid any sort of conflict at all. Not even the suggestion of, like, litigation.
Well, he's said straight out, and it's pretty obvious that it started off as a Harvest Moon fan game.
Right, yeah.
That's what it started off as, and then people were liking what he was doing, and he was getting it more and more into it, and then he just started building onto it and adding more and more features that weren't in Harvest Moon and things that he wanted that were outside of Harvest Moon. And I think it got to the point where he was ready to sell it, that it was different enough from Harvest Moon, because I mean, there's a couple other games I can't think of that are similar to Harvest Moon, but the point is that they don't have like a copyright on that genre. You know what I mean? Like Modern Warfare can't sue Battlefield for making a first-person war shooter.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's enough of a difference that he's not using any copyrighted characters, and that he made his own music, he made his own assets. It's just the idea of the farming sim, the passive farming sim that's really from Harvest Moon.
Right. So I can see that, and certainly don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying this from a position of, well, he should be sued. I'm saying it's awesome that he has been able to, because obviously nobody else is doing it. Like Harvest Moon is yesterday's news. The fact that Stardew Valley is carrying on its tradition is pretty fucking cool.
And then since Stardew Valley, there's been a shit ton of things that have picked up from that genre. Yeah. There's another one called Staxel that's like a Minecraft Stardew Valley mixture.
Interesting.
There's what is that? It's not coming. It's coming out soon. Called fuck. Anyway, it's like a mixture of Stardew Valley and like Pokemon almost. I can't think of the name for whatever reason, but people are like really excited about it. It's one of the bigger indies that are anticipated to come out soon. But there's a few others too that I could probably name off if I got a chance to think about it. But they I think even if Nintendo wanted to sue at this point, that it's so big that they are likely to make more money from allowing them on Switch, than going through litigation. So,
that's interesting.
And again, all by himself that all this was done. Outside of like the publishing distribution from Chucklefish, he did this entirely by himself, which is also impressive. So good job, Concerned to Ape. And he does mention that he feels like self-publishing is like the end goal for most developers anyway. Because you want that artistic freedom. You want to be able to do whatever the fuck you want. And he has the money and, like you said, the infrastructure, the resources to do it, so why not? Go for
Yeah.
it, man. You know what else we should be going for? The Firewatch edition, or the Firewatch Switch edition that's coming out. Now, are you ever planning on getting a Switch?
I have considered it, but I don't know. It's hard to say because I guess there are some Switch exclusives, but I've never been super Nintendo fanboy. But the Switch itself, I played my girlfriend's brother's Switch, and it's an awesome console. It's probably the best thing I've played that came out of Nintendo since the GameCube.
I didn't like the GameCube. I would say it's since the N64, personally.
Yeah.
But I agree. The Switch is fantastic, especially after what a shithole Wii U was.
Yeah.
So, and every time they come out with, every year really, it seems like they're being more and more friendly to indie devs, as are other platforms, but especially Nintendo. They really picked up on that, calling them the Nindies and everything. And in this case, they're bringing Firewatch. For those of you who don't remember, that's like the Gone Home-esque. The Gone Home-like is what I call them, walking sim. That also did the Gone Home thing and insinuating that it was one genre and it became something else. Not as bad as Gone Home, I think, but anyway. It was still a good game and fantastic voice acting, by the way. I was very pleased with that. Just not what I thought it was when I played it. Nevertheless, it's coming out on, let's see, which will reach the console on the 17th in the Americas, Europe, Australia, and Japan. So if you're in one of those places on the 17th, you can pick up Firewatch. They're also, I think they're adding some new things, like free roaming. Yes. They mentioned free roaming. There might be a few other, they call them a few tiny things. But free roaming is something that, because Firewatch is a pretty beautiful game to look at. So you could, I guess, just take a walk through the forest of the game and see all the sights. Which I feel like you could do that after the game, but maybe not, because when the game ended, I was a little pissed off and I haven't gone back to it. But anyway, oh, I forgot. Valve bought Campo Santo, didn't they?
Did they?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Valve bought Campo Santo. I forget when, but they bought Campo Santo. So maybe it mentions that could have been a huge factor in the fact that they're bringing it to Switch because Valve has connections or whatever.
That also means that we need to stop talking about them immediately. This is a horrible violation of our indie game standards.
Well, technically, Valve is indie. Technically speaking.
Oh man.
But anyway, you're right. Fuck them. Up next. Let's not fuck. What the fuck is going on here? Let's not fuck the Game Awards is what I was going with, because that makes sense. The Game Awards happened this past Thursday, and I did watch through the majority of it. It was pretty good. I have to say, the Game Awards overall, probably the best one I've seen so far since Jeff Keighley started doing his version of it.
Really, you thought this was better than last year when
as far as cringe goes?
Oh man, like the brothers and the Way Out developer.
Mm-hmm.
His drunk speech last year was so much better than his drunk speech this year.
He didn't flip out like he did last year. He was still fucking weird.
I know, it was so sad. I wanted to see.
That was one of my favorite parts last year. But as far as as intended entertainment goes, it was better this year. And probably my favorite part is not an indie thing, but my favorite part of the Game Awards this year was the performance that they did for Red Dead Redemption. They did this melody of the RD2, RD2, Red Dead 2. That's what I'm trying to say. They did this melody and it was fucking awesome. I thought anyway. It was fantastic. Because last year I remember the live music being terrible. It was some weird ass electronic shit. It just didn't belong. And I know they were going with the video game vibe, but it was okay. Well, this year they went the other direction with the.
Well, this year they had a fucking Hans Zimmer was.
Yeah. They went with the orchestral shit, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I love orchestral stuff, and the Red Dead 2 was my favorites. But that said, there were some big winners indie-wise. Best action game.
Dead Cells, man. I was like, it came up, and I was like, Dead Cells should win this, but it's not going to. And then it did, and I was like, holy
fuck. They beat Call of Duty.
Beat Far Cry 5.
I actually expected Mega Man to win just because of the fucking fan service.
Yeah.
But, I was pleased. I was like, wow, Dead Cells, nice job. Let me see some other winners for that. So the big winners, like, overall, Red Dead 2, obviously, God of War, and Fortnite were probably, like, the biggest winners just as far as overall awards go.
Oberdin won Best Art, though, and Celeste won Best Indie Game.
I will say I was a little disappointed in Best Art choice. I'm happy in Indie won, but, like, objectively speaking, Oberdin's art direction is so stylistic, I felt like it was like a little bit, it limited itself compared to, like, I thought God of War should have won that, to be honest. Oberdin is very...
look, I think Oberdin's victory demonstrates what I've long suspected, which is that the shit art of yesteryear is the hipster darling of this year.
That's basically what it. Yeah, that's basically what it came down to, and I'm happy for Lucas Pope for winning that because it's a fantastic game. But I just, like, objectively speaking, I think God of War should have won. But anyway, nevertheless, they did win Best Art. And then Celeste, you mentioned being the best independent game. That one was kind of a dumb. It was kind of a dumb category overall because I'm like, you already nominated Celeste as best overall game, best game of the year, right? And it was the only indie nominated in that category. So why the fuck would we think anything else was going to win in best independent game?
Right. That's a good point.
So
it also won games for impact, though, which is cool.
I didn't like that either. First of all, let me say, I think best independent game, that should have been Return of the Obra Dinn because of how well it was done. But again, Celeste is still a fantastic game, so I'm not really, like, that upset about it. But games for impact, I thought Florence should have won that, to be honest. Like, Celeste, to me, I don't really see the message being that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so I haven't played either of them, but everyone I know who has both played Celeste and has, dealt with depression, except I guess perhaps you, has said that it's an incredible depiction of depression, that it's perhaps the most authentic depiction of depression ever read.
I don't know.
Done in the game.
I mean, I deal with depression, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just not deep enough to see it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I can't speak to it because I haven't played it. Didn't play Florence either.
I played other games that have, like, pulled on my depression strings where I'm like, oh shit. But whatever. Anyway, congrats to them. They an Indie won Best Mobile Game, which was Florence. My favorite out of the indie mobiles that were listed was Donut County, personally. I just really enjoyed the game, but I can't complain about Florence. It's a good game. It's fantastic. I think the Astrobot might technically be an indie. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked into that. Let's see. Next up. Oh, Overcooked 2 won Best Family Game. That was my pick. That was good. Get out of here. There's like a gnat flying around. And this one was cool, too. Best strategy game was Into the Breach.
If it had been up to me, I probably would have given it to Frostpunk.
But Frostpunk, is that really strategy, though? I feel like that's like sim management. I mean, I guess that's a type of strategy.
I don't know. That's I would think of, like, strategy game as the overarching, and then, like, sim management would be a sort of subcategory of strategy game.
I guess. Into the Breach seems more pure to the strategy genre because it's like a tactics game.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Banner Saga 3, I didn't play, but I'm confident it was amazing as well.
That would have been my
first
second
two games were really good. But what I liked about Frostpunk was, and granted, I've only done a sampling of it, but god damn, does it make you... I mean, it is kind of a strategy game because you're strategizing about how to manage this
Balance out your bad
economy and
choices.
everything. And man, oh man, does it really fucking hit you with the tough stuff.
Yeah, it's like, you want to do this shitty thing or this shitty thing? Like, I don't want to do any shitty things. Okay, you're doing both shitty things.
Right. Yeah, but Into the Breach, I haven't played it. I've seen a little bit of it. Also looks really cool, and those guys obviously FTL I really enjoyed. So,
best student game, as indie as you get, pretty much. Combat 2018. So congratulations to those folks. I think they came from Norway. I don't know, somewhere in Europe. Best debut indie game, The Messenger, which is that's a Metroidvania, right? Like an old school 16-bit.
Yes, I believe so.
And that was not my pick, but not because I don't think it didn't deserve it, but just because I don't personally like a whole lot of Metroidvanias. There are some. I mean, I love Dead Cells, and that's a roguelite Metroidvania. But it's just not my really thing. I would have picked probably Moss, personally. It's an interesting game. Everything else is like esports bullshit I don't really care about, and whatever. But anyway, that was the Game Awards 2018 Indie winners. So congratulations to all those people. You're all fantastic, and we can't wait to see more out of you. You know what else we can't wait to see more of, Ian?
Oh, it must be the Dev Delve.
That's right.
Nice. All right. Well, this week for the Dev Delve, I wanted to have another sort of conversation piece because we were talking about the Void at Indie Fireside, and I've continued to try and play it sort of periodically over the course of the week since.
Yeah, you still haven't beaten it?
Well, no, fuck no, nowhere near. But like the worst part is that it's incredibly difficult to progress at all. I mean, the learning curve is so intense, obviously, but one of the things that I noticed that makes it really, really hard is that it uses there's a huge amount of randomization. Everything from the items that you can pick up to the events that happen are largely randomized. And as a result, it makes it very difficult to learn from your mistakes. And in a game that requires frequent replaying of many hours of the game, because you might not suffer consequences for your mistakes until several hours later. I actually found it to be a little frustrating because I felt like I wasn't able to learn. I wasn't able to become better at the game.
So are you talking about RNG in general?
Yeah. In any of its forms. And what I really wanted to talk about was there are certainly good and bad examples of using, randomization of mechanics of any kind. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it and sort of open the floor up, get your opinion, get some of the bots' opinions on randomization in games and where it's worked and where it didn't. And I have some places that we can start. We can talk about roguelikes and roguelites and stuff like that, and then listed a few games. The Void for one, and I know you're really into RimWorld, which I haven't played, but I know uses sort of procedural generation. So what are your thoughts on randomization in games?
Yeah, generally speaking, not to a specific game necessarily. I think RNG. I think I like RNG more than most people do, because, like you said, people get pissed off about it because they feel like they're getting screwed over by something that they can't control, which is the truth. But I think it has to be done right in any game, no matter the genre. So there are things like an XCOM uses RNG to determine whether, for instance, you hit an enemy or not, right? I think to an extent I enjoy that because it makes the game feel it makes you not overpowered in a way. I mean, sometimes you can min-max something in a game that uses RNG. But if you use it right, it makes you so you're not overpowered, and it can throw you curveballs, like in RimWorld, which we'll talk about later. It'll throw you curveballs where the game doesn't get stale. So that's the part of RNG that I like. The part that I can see it piss people off, and it does piss me off sometimes, is that, for instance, like in sports games, Madden, for instance, I'll play a game of football, and even though there's a lot of skill involved because you're controlling the players, each player has a rating in different skill categories, and in the end, RNG determines whether or not they're going to, for instance, catch the ball. You know what I mean? Based on how high the rating is, it's more or less likely. So, if I'm playing Madden, and my player has a rating, it's called the ball carrier, or ball carrying is the rating, is the category that's being rated. And I am trying to win this game, and every time that I get possession of the ball, I fumble it at some point. And I know I've watched real games, and not to say that doesn't happen from time to time, but it does not happen in like half of the games that you play throughout the season.
Right.
And when that happens to me in that kind of a game, that pisses me off because it's not fucking realistic.
Right.
And that's the bad part of RNG.
There's a problem with the simulation there.
Right.
Like, it's not an accurate depiction of the fantasy that you're trying to live out.
RNG, so the positives to RNG, just to sum up, is, for me anyway, is that it makes you so that you're not overpowered as a player. It provides good simulation when used correctly. It allows for curveballs so that gameplay doesn't get stale. The bad part being that it can take you out of the simulation very easily if not used correctly. So, how about you? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, there are instances, again, like you say, there are instances where it's used well and instances where it's used more poorly. And something that I've learned recently is that there's actually some lingo in game design theory around randomization. And so mechanics that are not randomized, where there's a single input and a single output and it's the same every time, that's called a deterministic mechanic. And a mechanic where you put an input in and you get a different outcome every time is non-deterministic. So the example would be like a move in chess versus a move in like D&D, where you have to like roll a dice, and have it sort of come out. And obviously there's gradation here. There are like very few, unless you're like flipping coins.
Tabletop game RNG, while can be frustrating, is like a fun kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
It's much easier to implement in a tabletop too, because it's, a lot of times, like you said, you're rolling a dice, and therefore it doesn't feel like you're being cheated. It's just, you can physically see it was just bad luck, essentially.
Right.
Whereas in a game, you're like, okay, there's something fucked up with the code. You know how like back in the day, you were playing like an SNES game, like The Lion King, and you start like, you just cannot, you keep falling. You're like, this fucking game's cheating, as like a 9-year-old, and then you like fucking throw the controller at the TV, and you're fucking done with it. I used to do that shit a lot. I'm like, fuck this shit, and I'm like, nah, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what the problem is in the digital world of RNG, I think. Whereas the tabletop, they kind of get it easier because it's all under your own. Because you are, even though it's RNG, you are controlling the RNG to an extent by rolling it.
And by extension, I think that as a result, probably the most mainstream genre of games that uses RNG most heavily is probably RPGs, because of the direct lineage there between tabletop and computer RPGs.
Right.
But
it's also simplified in RPGs for them usually because like the dice roll, it's just a random number generator.
Right.
Whereas it's a little bit more complicated in some of the other. Once you start like procedurally generating or
Right, and you have like rules and stuff, and that actually brings me right to the next thing, which is roguelikes. How do you feel about roguelikes, Josh?
Since doing this show, I have basically kind of grown into it. I used to not like it not because of the RNG, but because I'm trying to think of how to word this. I didn't like the fact that there wasn't an end game necessarily, or if there was, that I'd have to continually start over. Like the idea when roguelikes were really just becoming more popular in the beginning is that, I'm talking like back when like Rogue Legacy was like new. You know what I mean? Like I was like, what? Why would people want to play a game that you constantly lose and have to start over that often?
Right.
And then I started playing more, and I got into it, and then people started being more creative and innovative with it. So I was like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. And then I started to feel, and actually I would say the RNG almost helped that fact, because again, I started to realize that it was keeping my gameplay fresh. I understood what roguelikes were being, in the fact that it was a different game every time you played, essentially,
right,
with the same mechanics, but different. It was always different when you played. So I've kind of grown to really like good ones. I'm as much as I love Edmund McMillan, and as popular as The Binding of Isaac is, I don't like the game.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Binding of Isaac either, even though it's always the one that's sort of brought up.
And yet, if I play Enter the Gungeon, which is heavily inspired by Binding of Isaac, I love it. But they've innovated it in different ways. They've added things like more deep lore, more things to collect and unlock. I feel like comparatively, and granted, Enter the Gungeon's newer and has been able to build off of Binding of the Isaac. That's like comparing Minecraft to Dwarf Fortress. Obviously, right. Minecraft is superior because it's been years in between. You know what I mean? But right. It's still the fact that Binding of Isaac wasn't quite where I wanted it to be as a player. And now they've kind of evolved into something I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty sweet. So
yeah. And I think roguelikes, it's interesting because, I find the genre to be pretty impenetrable. I keep taking sort of cracks at it, and there are, roguelite games, or games that are classified as being in the roguelite genre, or at least peripheral to the roguelite genre, that I really enjoy.
You like Dead Cells, right?
Well, I haven't played Dead Cells.
Oh, yet. You haven't yet?
I haven't. I own it because I'm very interested in it, and it not only I love Metroidvanias, so it's got me on that. It has just been described as a Souls-light, and I love the Souls game, so got me on that as well.
There are some comparisons there, without spoiling.
Yeah, don't spoil it because I'm gonna play it soon. Then there are other ones I've tried to play NetHack and these other great roguelike games, these renowned and prestigious roguelike games, and I don't like them.
Rogue Legacy was probably the first one that I played that started to hook me. As old as that game is, I think that
I've been eyeing it up because people have been talking about it, and it sounds really interesting.
You've never played Rogue Legacy?
No.
That's such an old game. That's like one of those. It's probably at this point. We always talk about Indie Hall of Fame. At this point, it might be in the Indie Hall of Fame.
Interesting.
Rogue Legacy. The two things. Speaking of RNG, and Rogue Legacy, the two things that it has going for is the constantly changing castle. Although you can pay in the game, there's a mechanic to pay to keep it the same as the last playthrough.
Right.
But the ever-changing castle, and then it has that hereditary system where each one that dies, really they pass on genes to the other people, and you have to choose which traits from the ancestor to play as, which is the other interesting part. And there's a little bit of humor with it too, which also keeps it fresh. So.
Sunless Sea has a system like that. That's my most recent attempt to get into the roguelike genre.
Sunless Sea, I love their stuff because of the narrative part, but the rogue part of it is so challenging that talk about alienating. Like,
yeah, it's challenging and like incredibly slow.
Yeah.
I like couldn't get into it, and I also couldn't get into the. There's definitely a kind of game where like a huge amount of it takes place in the UI, and like that is a huge part of Sunless Sea. And while I would not call that, I would not pass a judgment on that approach to design. I would say it's not my favorite. I like the more actually being in the game world to some extent. So doesn't really have that going for it too. And that's the other thing, is that roguelikes are so much about management on top of this randomization. You know, they definitely they're not so much my thing.
For like people that have the collector inside of them, the hoarder.
Yeah.
Roguelikes also have that kind of like with the unlocks, it kind of has that thing going for it.
Sure, yeah.
Especially if they display it well. So like in Dead Cells, I'm trying to think if this is a spoiler, so basically there are unlocks like any other roguelike pretty much, but it displays it in a way that you feel like you're collecting them.
Nice.
So it kind of like tickles that part of me. And something like Rogue Legacy, as old as it is, didn't really display it, but you could feel it in the gameplay because because you keep the weapons that you unlock and stuff like that, the abilities. Right. Whereas other ones, it's more like there's now a chance that you'll have them pop up in random chests or something like that.
Right.
I think that happens in like Enter the Gungeon, for instance.
And both of these are certainly like, I mean, a lot of these are interesting design decisions. They just don't necessarily resonate with me, although clearly at some level they do, because I keep trying these games. So eventually I'm sure I'll find one that I like. Now is RimWorld considered a roguelike?
First and foremost, it's considered, the devs call it a story generator.
Okay.
Because you're playing a game and the randomness comes in from the events that happen to your colony. You know, there's sim management involved because you're building this colony, and it's like a little bit Dwarf Fortressy where you have to manage the people in your colony and that sort of thing. But the randomness really comes in mostly with the events, and because of that. Because the idea is that you're making a new story every time you play, and it's challenging. So people are going to die. You're going to have to overcome these challenges, and it creates a good story, a good narrative because of these challenges. Right. Is the idea behind it. I don't know if I would consider it a roguelike, because it's not like, because one of the key things of roguelikes is that every time you play, you're supposed to be able to get better through unlocks and skill and learning. And not that you don't get better at playing RimWorld by learning, but it's not in the same way that you play like, okay, well, now I know this boss battle that I just died to. I'm getting better at practicing this boss battle. It's more like, okay, it's like how you get good at Minecraft. You know what I mean? Because remember in the beginning, there wasn't like, you just kind of had to figure it out. Like, okay, how do you make these things in this recipe? Like, there wasn't a thing that told you until a little bit later. So it's kind of that way where you have to like, okay, well, I tried it this way, now I should try it a different, like maybe I should start researching this first, and I have to prepare for these certain events because that never happened before, that sort of thing. But there's no like unlocks that you have. It's if you start over, you just start over.
It's interesting. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm trying to think now exactly how to, because there's one more area that I want to hit, which moves away from roguelikes specifically, and that is the game Gods Will Be Watching, which we mentioned in passing on this show. Certainly, I don't know if you guys covered it previously.
We did. Yeah.
So the upshot of Gods Will Be Watching is that it puts you in a series of sort of crisis situations, and then you have to sort of do resource and time management sort of things in order to avert these sort of disastrous outcomes.
It's like an impossible game.
It's virtually impossible. It really is, and a huge part of that is its RNG, because you can literally start a scenario and have it be already unwinnable, and then you don't know until you might never know. And in fact, in subsequent releases of the game, they've had the option of eliminating the RNG from the game.
No, I think. And that's a good play, because I think that's a bad way. As much as I love the game and the concept, and I like the art, and I like the mechanics, but the RNG making it impossible to win from the beginning is not a good game design.
Yeah, certainly not. I think
you should never take the power out of the player's hands. The player should always be able to control the overall destiny, the overall end of the game. Like, if they lose, it should be on the player. If they win, it should be on the player, not on RNG. The RNG should just throw curveballs at them. It should keep things fresh, but not ultimately define what happens in the end.
For sure. And I mean, I think especially, like, I deeply respect this game. I think it's super, super fucking cool. And I like Deconstruct Team and their whole deal. But in my opinion, a game that is trying to do what they were trying to do with Gods Will Be Watching actually suffers from RNG, just like you say. If you take that power away from the player, it doesn't work.
It's not a game anymore.
If anything, a game that's attempting to create these situations requires more meticulous design and less automation in its design. More handcrafting of these moments, in my opinion, and it's interesting because it's an example of a really great game that features RNG that where the RNG is actually something of a hindrance.
I think what kind of happened too, because Gods Will Be Watching was originally a jam game,
right? So
I think in a jam game, they didn't have time to do that handcrafting, like you said.
Sure.
So, that would happen, and, and I could see it, as frustrating as it would be playing that, I'm like, well, it's a jam game, they didn't have time to balance it out or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
So, but then when they released it, I think they took that jam game and just built more features on it and more story and gameplay, but didn't necessarily work a whole lot on balancing.
Certainly not until the subsequent release where they introduced the difficulty levels, which I think is a great move. I do wish perhaps that they had identified a little more strongly with the non-RNG version, as opposed to like sort of referring to it as like sort of a phony version of the game. But whatever, that's I guess.
Well, because because they mentioned like the hard version of it, that like, this is the way it's meant to be played. I'm like, well,
right.
You can't play it. It's not hard. It's impossible. There's a difference,
Right. So, but yeah, that's and to bring it all full circle, that's an issue that I'm running into with the Void as well. Because I played Pathologic and I loved it. It's deeply punishing, very, very, very difficult. But once you get the hang of it, the world is sort of predictable, and you can plan accordingly. The Void is just. Fuck, man. I don't think I've ever played a game that kicked my ass so hard, but like not from like a Twitch perspective. It's not that the combat isn't particularly difficult, but the resource management is just so unforgiving. It's so unforgiving that I don't know. I literally might not be good enough to play the game, and it's such a shame because the themes that the resource management is in aid of are really sophisticated and really deep. The story and the lore of the world is some of the most original and interesting, narrative I've encountered in a game. And I don't know. I want to be able to experience it, but the inability to sort of make any gain any ground. I don't know. There is an easy mod. Maybe it's worth checking it out, even though it's like sacrilege.
Kind of going back to Dead Cells too. Basically, compared to this, is you can be difficult. Same thing Gods Will Be Watching, but you can be difficult without sacrificing the fun.
Mm-hmm.
Dead Cells is very difficult. But when you play, like, so you're playing the Void or Gods Will Be Watching and you're getting your ass kicked over and over again. Unless you're a masochist, who really wants to do that? Like, who wants to start over again? And that's like the whole point of these roguelikes or any RNG really, is to start over again and try again. You can't feel yourself getting better because you're not, because it's impossible, because it's the RNG. You're not controlling it. Whereas in Dead Cells, you know, you might get your ass kicked, but you can say the next time you play, you're like, okay, I got better. Even if you die 40 times, you can feel yourself getting better and better, and therefore there's the feeling of progress, even though you're not making progress in the game necessarily. You're making progress as a player, getting better at the game. And in these situations, you're not getting better, you're just getting your ass kicked every single time, because it's not even your fault.
Exactly. And, you know, who knows? You know, to be fair, you know, perhaps I will go on break and I'll have, you know, it seems to take people who do beat the game about 30 hours to do so. Maybe if I have 30 hours to sink into it, maybe I will be able to master, you know, the learning curve. But, so I don't know. It definitely raised thoughts in my mind about randomization and difficulty in games. And, of course, it's always a hot topic. So,
Smith, ZVK in chat, that's Zach for everyone, says, so a big fan of roguelikes here. I like it because it makes the game more real. It gives the sense of real loss, and it probably isn't for everyone. And which I think I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier with, it happens in RimWorld, and like I mentioned XCOM, even though it's not indie, but where the RNG kind of takes you down a peg, not being overpowered, and, you know, like the permadeath stuff in XCOM, or actually in RimWorld as well. There's permadeath, so it adds to the simulation that life is random sometimes, and there's things that are out of your control. So what you have to do as a player is adapt, and therefore it makes it feel more real. You know, that's what happens in RimWorld or in XCOM. You know, you're like, oh shit, one of my best soldiers just got his head blown off by an alien. What am I going to do about this? I need to train a new one, and then try a different strategy next time. You know, there's that kind of RNG and roguelikes in general kind of add to that simulation, and that's what makes the RNG fun, in my opinion, in these games. So I agree, is what I'm saying.
Cool. That's good. That was a good one. I felt like that was a nice meaty dead delve there.
Yeah, we delved deep into that.
Delved deep. All right.
Well, you know what else we're going to delve deep into?
A riot?
Riot, because we're starting one. Starting the riot. This week, we're talking about Bad North. Oh, he's such a bad boy. I'm in a weird mood now. I didn't drink that much Scotch. No, I didn't drink that much. I didn't drink that much. I did pour myself kind of a larger glass than what you're supposed to. But
nice.
I don't think I'm that much of a. I mean, as much as little as I drink, I don't think I'm that much of a lightweight. As I completely butcher sentences. Whatever. Fuck you guys.
Handle my fucking liquor. What are you talking about?
Fuck you guys. Fucking my show. I'm fucking going home. Your home, Josh. I'm fucking going out of my home. Fuck you.
Bad North.
Bad North. Bad North is a charming but brutal real-time tactics roguelike defend your idyllic island kingdom against a horde of Viking invaders as you lead the desperate exodus of your people. Command your loyal subjects to take full tactical advantage of the unique shape of each island. Everything is at stake. Fail and watch the blood of your subjects stain the ground red. As you can see, this is a happy game. So this is a real-time strategy game where you move from island to island, and as it says, you have to use the terrain to your advantage. That's part of the strategy, is trying to be the best tactician that you can be as the hordes come to pillage and destroy. It's actually a pretty simplistic real-time strategy game. I've noticed within the past year or so that indies have taken real-time strategy and have really made it a point to simplify it.
Yeah.
What do you? How do you feel? First of all, do you like real-time strategy?
So it depends. There are definitely real-time strategy games that I like. I played a lot of StarCraft and a lot of Age of Empires back in the day. Played some Warcraft as well. Those are games I really liked. Played a lot of Command and Conquer. So yes, there are real-time strategy games that I really love. However, I'm not very good at real-time strategy games.
Do you turtle a lot, or do you just throw people at it?
Yeah, so I mean, I go back and forth between my strategies because I don't have a definitive one that works.
Because I don't have a strategy.
Yeah, no, I sort of play it by ear, but if I can't get into the fantasy of the real-time strategy game, then I'm not going to be into it. So if it's a largely generic medieval castle building game, for instance, and it has incredibly deep mechanics, maybe a highly original take on the mechanics of the genre, but is basically a generic world on top of it, I'm not gonna like it. On the other hand, something like this is really fascinating to me because you're absolutely right, and it's not just real-time strategy. I find that there's a trend in indie. There's a certain sort of trajectory of some indie games to take a genre and then deconstruct it down to its most elemental moment. It's the PT effect, right? Take a horror game and reduce it down to the moment of walking around a corner.
It's pure. It's pure.
Yep, absolutely, and I love it. And this game looks so sick, and it looks like the kind of real-time strategy game that I could actually get good at. Because it's so minimalistic. It limits your abilities and the geography that you have to look at to a nice restrictive area. I feel like it could create really intimate gameplay it's really interesting to me.
And I think it's almost a little bit of an FTL thing in this because I'm don't quote me on this, but I believe the islands are randomized, and I think, I'm not 100% sure, I have to go back and look, but I think they're randomized and they kind of uncover they do in FTL. You know how, as you progress through FTL, it gives you different pathways, I guess.
Okay. That's interesting.
I think. The other thing is, just as a bit of information, this I didn't mention it before, it's made by Plausible Concept. Those are the developers. Bad North is actually released all over the damn place. I think they actually initially released. Again, don't quote me on this. I should look this up, but I think they initially released on Discord's new game launcher store thing. The competitor to Steam that everyone seems to be doing now. They are released on Steam, but they're also on the Discord store, GOG. They're on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox. They're on cartridge as well, yet another Steam competitor that came out this year, and the Mac App Store, because they're planning on going to mobile, iOS, and Android sometime next year in 2019. So for those of you who are mobile gamers for some reason, no judgment. I mean, whatever.
No judgment. It's the snarkiest of snark, and then just say no judgment.
No judgment, you plebes. So yeah, and it's published by Raw Fury. So I will say, sometimes you can judge a game if you haven't played this yet. You can judge a game by the publisher sometimes, because Raw Fury is one of those indie publishers that have really good eyes.
Oh yeah.
For good games, Raw Fury, Tiny Build, and Devolver is the other one I was thinking of. Some good ones for good games. So, yeah, I really like the pureness and simplification of it, and it translates into kind of everything they do. It's smooth animation, and everything in the game, but the art in itself is very simplistic as well. It's basically like these little pawns with weapons that you just move around and hope you win, basically. Which I kind of like. It reminds me of a more grown-up way of playing Army Men. You ever, the plastic Army Men?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I used to play with that a lot. I had a ton of them, and I would set them up in these like massive battles, and then go at it from there. And it kind of reminds me of that, except more adult because it's more strategy involved or whatever. But
Right.
anything else? Oh, by the way, it is available for Windows and Mac, so PC and Mac. Anything else that you would like to say about Bad North?
No, it's gameplay is absolutely hypnotic. I need to stop watching it, or else I'm going to get distracted. Yeah, no, it looks pretty sick. Looks pretty fucking sick.
The menu art is pretty cool, too, if you haven't seen it yet. Well, you know what else is pretty sick, man?
What else is pretty sick? Is it peep shows?
Yeah, peeping at people. That's pretty
They're
fucking
pretty
sick.
fucking sick, if you ask me.
Nevertheless, we're going to Peep Show.
Please give all your attention to Early Access.
This week on Peep Show, the game we're talking about is, if I can get the thing up and running, there we go, Change by Delve Interactive. So first thing is, Delve Interactive has a history with us. They actually won the second IRX that we did. Year 2 of IRX. They won the most revolutionary game award with their game Poncho. They also kind of got, not famous, but like they got a lot of attention from a post-mortem they did of Poncho, talking about how that game basically almost made the dude that made it homeless. Because it was not commercially successful in the least. Plus, they had a falling out with the publisher that was helping them out. And that's partly what actually inspired the game Change, because hence the homelessness part of it. Because Change is about, they're calling it a homeless survival simulator. So you play as a homeless man, simulating the life of a homeless man, having to beg in the city. So the features that they motion. I'll read some of the features that they list off on here. First of all, it says the Change is an emotional homeless survival experience set in a randomly generated, here go with RNG again, randomly generated city with roguelike elements. Another roguelike. Explore, survive, earn perks, find items, and more to develop your character and escape to a new life. Honestly, the concept in itself is really cool. Outside of the message of, because the whole point of it, they wanted to. It kind of inspired them, getting to that point where they were, getting to that point where they were almost homeless. But then they decided to take this opportunity to also raise awareness, because they're not making this game as a joke. You know what I mean? They're truly trying to make it simulate a homeless person's life. And they're taking the opportunity to raise awareness for homeless people in the UK specifically, because it's a problem. Honestly, in countries like the UK, the United States, Canada, places like that, there really shouldn't be homeless people because there's enough resources for everyone. Nevertheless, there is. Anyway, so some of the features, it says there's an endless city to explore filled with randomly generated NPCs and environments that you can interact with. There's a perk mechanic that you can, like I mentioned with roguelikes in the Delve earlier, it's kind of like the unlockables, the upgrades are kind of a staple to roguelikes, hence the way that you get better at every playthrough. You do have to beg for change or work and try and find a way to get home. That's part of the simulation. There's also, like, at night, they have randomly generated events that kind of, we mentioned in RimWorld, develop your own story that way. So I wonder, kind of, outside of the fact that, their own life experiences, I wonder what kind of, makes me wonder what games influenced this.
No.
There's also a weather system. As you can see right now in the gameplay, it's raining. And based on the weather, it kind of forces you to adjust your gameplay, because much like in real life, when it rains, it sucks. When it's cold, it sucks even more. You know what I mean? Like, you can die from exposure if you don't take care of your needs. You know what I mean? And you have to build up your inventory by finding food and items that you need to survive. Also, they have a very awesome soundtrack, which you can, I believe you can get it. Let me double check here, but I believe you can get it on Steam. What do you think of Change while I look this up?
I think it looks like a fascinating game. It's also funny because my buddy Hunter actually just accidentally designed this game for one of his final exams. A very similar game. We had to do a door puzzle, and his involved being a homeless person who needs to use the restroom in a Starbucks.
It's currently in early access, so I don't know if you can put an OST when it's in early access, so maybe that's why, but it is not on Steam. I thought it was. But it is in early access, so keep that in mind as well, but that's why it's in Peep Show. So you said that your friend was making this, like, is it about homelessness?
Something very similar. Yeah, it's about being a homeless man who has to get into a Starbucks bathroom, and in order to do so, he has to buy a coffee, and in order to buy a coffee, he has to accumulate enough change to facilitate that. So it was very interesting because we had just been talking about it, and then we came into my apartment, and I was looking at the games for this week again, and I was like, wait a second. I actually don't think I had looked at Change prior to that. I feel like I skipped it.
I feel like there's a game similar to that, even, where it was just some guy having to get change for like a simple goal.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I feel like maybe I'm getting confused because I've been following Change for a while. So maybe I had played like a demo or something and gotten confused about it. But I thought there was a game that was essentially just you as a homeless person trying to get enough change for like something to eat or something like that. But I might be getting confused.
That's interesting. I mean, his sort of starting point had just been like to design a simple like point and click adventure puzzle, and that just happened to be what he chose. And it was so apropos. So sucks to be him. I told him he should lawyer them up and try to sue them, and he was like, yeah, what a crime, having the idea first. How dare they?
Then he gets sued because they actually had the idea first.
Right, of course. That's all I have to say about that. Like I say, it looks really fascinating, and definitely is a game with a conscience.
Well, I will say that again, we know the people at Delve Interactive. They're fantastic. We've interviewed them before they were on IRX. They were actually at a different indie convention that we met them at originally. Go check out the game Poncho, because that's a fantastic puzzle platformer.
Just looking at it.
Yeah, it's a great game. So based on that, the quality should be there, I think.
Yeah.
And especially if you're into these kinds of simulation games. You know what's not a simulation? Or maybe it is.
Free things.
The fact that you can get games for free, even though
free fun is a simulation.
Well, fun is a simulation when you really think about it. If you want to get deep again.
Whoa!
It is time.
Have another bottle of scotch there.
It is time for free fun.
This week on Free Fun, we're talking about Deltarune, the anagram of Undertale that was released as a game.
The anagram that you only realized like a little bit before the show started.
That's me. And that's the thing. That's the thing about Deltarune is that, man, I don't know. Its huge genius brain is just so intimidating. And it's so smart, and it knows it, and then it sort of mocks you.
So do you feel that it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of vocabulary right now.
Well, so it's not, I don't know if this is the word you were looking for, but I wouldn't necessarily call it pretentious.
Yeah, that's the word.
I wouldn't call it pretentious per se, because it's actually, I think it's pretty down to earth in its at its heart, right? The moment I'm thinking of is the moment where you have to choose a partner or try to recruit a partner for like a group project in class, and that's all very earnest. But I don't know, man. It has an attitude like Undertale and this game. They have this sort of attitude that is, yeah. Pretentious isn't the right word. It's like some other form of pretense.
Righteousness.
Almost. Righteousness, perhaps.
Because
it is.
like Undertale made you feel like complete shit if you went genocide.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it is righteousness. There's just a quality about it that I don't care for. I don't care for it. It rubs me the wrong way. I understand. I can see the sophistication in these games. I understand why people are drawn to them, but there's something about them that I don't like. Part of it too is that like, well, I don't know. Like for example, Undertale got a huge amount of attention for sort of pointing out that like, oh, well, like, what if monsters were actually just misunderstood? And this like struck everybody as like sort of deeply original, but I guess it struck me as sort of trite. Maybe I'm just like cynical.
Well, this again was one dude making a game all by himself. So I mean,
no, I get that. That's why I don't want to be too hard on him. I mean, he made a good game, right? Like
he made more money than you did.
You can say he made more money than I did, and it's a good game. Like, I can see that, even though I didn't like it, I can see that it's a good game. I did recently learn that he possibly stole his entire conception of his being nice to monsters mechanic from Persona 2, but I'm also starting to discover, the more I hang out with people that play Persona games, that it seems like Persona games basically do everything first. They're
like
also
the Simpsons
like 17
of video games.
Exactly, and there are like 17,000 of them since like the mid '80s. So like, I guess that's how it works. But yeah, so Deltarune is sort of, yeah, it has this sort of mystical quality to it, where, just to sort of give a sense of how this game starts. Like, it's right as soon as you start installing the game, it starts giving you bullshit. It's just like the installer comes up, like the install shield wizard comes up, and it's like,
it calls you a terrible person.
Basically, yeah. Well, it's like the terms of service is like an empty white box, except for like the words, you will accept everything that happens. And you click OK, and then it installs the game, and then the game starts, and then it has you like create a character. Immediately,
you're just like, fuck you.
Well, it goes through, and it has you create this character. And I don't know. I can't. It's kind of a spoiler just because of how much attitude the game gives you right off the bat. Is like kind of like, it's almost a plot point because it's so fucking gigantic.
Well, I think to an extent that the character in itself is supposed to be this like angsty teen almost, where they're just like, fuck you to everything.
Yeah.
And I think over the course of the game, they start to like they start to go through this like self awareness, where they're maybe right. I shouldn't be an asshole all the time.
Maybe what I don't like about these games is that they remind me too much of myself as a teenager. It's entirely possible. But yeah, okay, so yeah, I got not too far in Deltarune. I got basically to the part where you have to pick a partner for your group project or whatever, and everybody's like turning you down. And then it was basically time to start the show. So that's where I got to, and yeah, I felt, I mean, look, if you liked Undertale, you'll probably fucking shit at this game.
Well, I think part of it too is like, it's not even necessarily the game now. A lot of it's like lore searchers and like, the theorists and stuff like that. Because there's so much lore and stuff underneath it all.
Yeah.
that you have to like uncover, especially now that these two games are connected. My thing wasn't necessarily that. I mean, although I see where you're coming from, but it was more just I didn't like. I one of the things like so it kind of happens in Pokemon where I don't like random encounters all that much.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts because I'm very impatient. So I'm like, okay, I'm moving forward. Oh, here comes another one. Son of a bitch! I don't want to do this. It takes too long.
Chore.
And then not only that, it's like at least in Pokemon, you just got to push some buttons, right? This one, then you have to fucking actively play a goddamn bullet hell or whatever the fuck, like a bullet hell mini game, right?
Right.
To survive your encounters. And I don't even like bullet hells that much.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Bullet hell, like kind of like how I was talking about roguelikes, I'm that way with bullet hells as well, except bullet hells have grown on me much more slowly, because I'm still kind of very like about bullet hells.
Right.
There's been a few, like I mentioned Tim Donnelly to you earlier, I forget if it was on the show or not, but he made Boss 101. I really liked Boss 101. Bullet hells, shmups, or whatever the fuck you want to call them. But in this case, a combination of like the random encounters in Undertale, and then on top of that, having to deal with them by going through a game genre mechanic thing that I do not like in the first place.
Right.
I wish it had stuck to the puzzles. Like, it seems like Deltarune is more, obviously narrative heavy, but more, much more puzzle focused with the occasional encounter.
Yeah.
That's what it comes off as.
It's definitely, it struck me as more of an adventure game when I played other, for sure.
So one thing I will say that if you are, like you mentioned, a fan, like Ian mentioned, if you're a fan of Undertale, you're going to like Deltarune. Because not only is it more Undertale, with maybe a little bit watered down, you might feel, if you like the combat or whatever, or the encounters, I should say. But it still hooks into the story, and you can kind of uncover the lore and all that sort of stuff. Same art, maybe a little bit more high quality, because he probably has more resources at this point, because he made bank on Undertale. But it's all for free. And by the way, it does say episode 1 on the website, so I would assume that there's more Deltarune to come, much to Ian's elation.
I'm all about it. Hey, I don't want to shit on it too much, because that's not what we do here. We respect good games even if we don't like them.
Yeah, that's not the kind of taboo I was talking about earlier. Okay. All right. No shit on things. Indie Game Riot quality. Like I said, so clean, Tumblr won't even flag us.
Well, we're not for lack of trying.
They flag pancakes, but not us. Anyway, you know what else we're going to have to flag?
Our outro?
Yes, the end of the show, because we are done here, except for a little bit of the information process where we tell you that you can actually support us in multiple different ways. If you like what we do and you want to help us grow, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/IndieGameRiot. You can also, on Twitch, if you watch us live, subscribe on Twitch and do all that sort of stuff, bits or whatever your favorite thing to do is. If you have the Amazon Prime thingy, you can give us the free thing of that every month. So that's very cool of you if you decide to do that. Doesn't even cost you extra money or anything. And it still supports us. Outside of money, you can also support us by helping us find indie news, sending it to us through various means, such as Twitter @IGR Podcast or Facebook.com/IGR Podcast. And of course, emailing us, contact@indiegameriot.com. And then we do have a Discord server, which the links are below. Either the live stream or the recorded version, no matter what you're watching, they are below. So check out the Discord. We have over 100 people in there. So, say hi. Lots of devs if you're a dev. Lots of people who love indies if you're just a guy that loves indies, or girl. Whatever. Anything else I'm missing? I don't know. Any last words that you have to say? Oh, reminder that Indie Fireside, the new game, has been announced. We're going to be covering Lisa for the next Indie Fireside. So for those of you who want to participate in that, Again, it's like a book club for games.
It's pronounced Lisa.
Lisa!
All capital letters, that means you have to shout it.
You're killing me, Lisa. That's not the right thing, but whatever.
You're tearing me apart.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I did not hit her.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Jesus. Anyway, Lisa is what we're doing. It is under $10, so feel free to get it, or if you already have it, play it. That way you can participate and discuss when we talk about the game in Indie Fireside, or even talk about it during the month on our Discord server. And if you have trouble affording it, let us know and we will do our best to get you a copy. All right? And do your outro.
My outro?
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. That's all, folks. Toodles.